The snapback mechanisms for sanctions is included in the UNSCR that endorsed the Iranian nuclear deal, as we call it, in 2015. It was enshrined there after the direct negotiations between the Iranian foreign minister and the United States State Secretary. John Kerry was the State Secretary back then. So this so-called snapback mechanism is not typical for any other sanctioned regimes. In essence, it allowed any country to put up for a vote, to put this resolution up for a vote, so that the sanctions alleviation regime will continue to be in place. And the country with a veto power even unilaterally could block such a resolution. That would mean that the extension of alleviation of sanctions won't happen. There are two notions here. First, this is not a very succinct wording here, but it's the main idea is to constantly keep the Iranian colleagues alert so they won't take any steps outside of this framework. The second notion is that Iran agreed to this exotic mechanism purely for the fact that it was sure that it would never violate this deal. Therefore, let them have this mechanism, let it be over their heads, but as something put on the back burner. But Iran is not going to violate it. Therefore, they agreed to it very easily. And the idea that the deal will not be broken by them, but the US in 2017, or 18 or 19, I'm not sure. They couldn't even think about it. But it happened, and the US have withdrawn from the deal. They said that they did not recognize this resolution. Europe, instead of demanding that the US would go back to implementation of their obligations, also started to shy away from commitment to the agreement. And the number of violations is very well known. The resolution that the US does not recognize. Now, the Europeans are cherry-picking what they want from that resolution. And what they want is this exotic mechanism for a snapback. It's very hard to explain in an understandable way. This is a trap. And that phrase, that para, was created as a trap for Iran. It's just yet another piece of proof that Iran does not intend to violate the NPT treaty, the commitment to the nuclear deal. Nevertheless, the next Iranian government has fallen into this trap, the trap that they have inherited from 2015. Together with the People's Republic of China, we've done everything to give diplomacy a chance. Even after the resolution about the snapback of sanctions was adopted, there was a chance to agree that for some time, we wanted a 3-month extension. We wanted to extend the Iranian nuclear deal in their entirety without adding anything or crossing anything out in all its aspects, so it would continue to be in place for the time when we hoped we could continue negotiations. Since West has torpedoed that and has blackmailed the majority of the UN Security Council members so they would support their destructive position, I don't know what Iran do, how they would respond. This is incapability to negotiate with anyone, and not giving 2 or 3 months so that Iran would be able to negotiate and find possible conditions of working further with the IAEA, with the US as well. Iran is still prepared to have dialogue, maybe an indirect one, through mediators and with the so-called E3. Iran was also holding conversations with them. However, the outcome of those negotiations just proves that from the very beginning, the European trio was trying to find any pretext to bring back sanctions. So any bona fide proposals of our Iranian colleagues to find a compromise, they were all turned down. When something was announced that there is hope for an agreement, right the very next morning, it turned out there was none. This is a deliberate operation aimed at coming to the next level of choking the Islamic Republic of Iran in terms of economy and finance and so on. What you are writing from time to time, and political analysts are also mentioning that the threat of new strikes against Iran is still in place. And as some are reporting, the people who know something about that they're discussing in practical matters, it's very telling. It's all synchronized, the military threat and economic issues as well. It just means that the European countries have no qualms about violating resolutions, be that on Iran or Kosovo or Minsk agreements on Ukraine. There are plenty of examples of that.
Hi, Minister. Welcome back to New York. Xu Dezhi with China Central Television. A couple of days ago, after meeting with President Zelensky, U.S. President Trump said that he believed Ukraine can take back all the territories and even went further. And you met with Mr. Marco Rubio, and it's, let's say, a constructive talk. With this kind of ever-changing policies from your U.S. colleagues, how is Russia planning to engage with the U.S., especially, particularly with the Trump administration on this issue? Thank you.
You can call it ever-changing, you can call it flexible policies. You see, every state, especially every leader, has its own style of dealing in the international arena and domestically as well. Indeed, we appreciate that the United States are aware of one most important thing, that in principle, it is not correct when states are refusing to even talk to each other, the way it was done by the Europeans and Biden during his administration. Especially in the times when so many events on historical scale are taking place, not to talk to each other is simply criminal. Therefore, we appreciate that the Trump administration, from the very beginning, they've proposed to bring back our dialogue. We have rekindled it, and we have enshrined it back in February at the meeting with Marco Rubio, and later during a telephone conversation between President Putin and President Trump, that we acknowledge that Russia and the US and every other country have their own national interests. And the promotion of such national interests is a right of every state. When we've met with Marco Rubio, we have repeated this philosophy. We have recommitted to it. And in cases when our interests coincide, and there are not many cases in relations between Russia and the US. However, when such interests do coincide, it would be stupid not to use this in order to implement some mutually beneficial projects, be that in space or economy or any other sphere. The majority of cases when US and Russian interests do not coincide, the most important thing is not to let it result in confrontation or a collision, especially a hot confrontation, and we're united in this position. In diplomacy, as you know, primarily in public diplomacy, a lot of things can be spoken out loud, considering the specifics of the moment. And there are plenty of moments, and sometimes the circumstances change, so we don't see that the US is withdrawing from the policy of holding open, frank dialogue with the Russian Federation as well as with China and a number of other countries, that the United States are having differences of opinion and contradictions and different vision of the way they should trade further and conduct economic deals. You see, that's diplomacy per se, when colliding interests have to be reconciled and put in order in such a way that confrontations could be avoided. Some of our European colleagues have turned diplomacy either into kissing up to their friends from Washington, so that friends from Washington would continue to play in Biden's war, or they're turning, they're substituting diplomacy with sanctions. This is a path without any promise. It won't succeed. However, a frank dialogue on any matters, well, we see that the U.S. is prepared for that, and we're also prepared to conduct it. As for diplomatic comments, they could be very different.